Okay. Right. Got it. Okay. All right. So what we were looking at on Friday is what if a person's main source of income, like his business, is as a money lender? He's a financier, right? And he makes his money from lending money to non-Jews. And a Jew comes to him and says, I'd like you to give me a interest-free loan. So he says, Misha ikar parnasaso b'halva l'goy beribis, eno chayv lahalvos liYisrael. So he says, in that case, you're not under any obligation to lend money to a Jew without interest. Elim kein ha'Yisrael hu ani v'tzarach mos l'tzarchei achila, unless, of course, it's a charity situation where he needs the money for food. And the same thing would be true as if you're in the money lending business and you lend money to both Jews and non-Jews, but you always use a heter iska to be able to live off of this business. You also would be exempt from lending money to a Jew on an interest-free basis. If you, however, have the ability to make a good income such that for your Jewish clients you can do an interest-free loan, and for your non-Jewish clients you can lend with interest, that of course would be the optimal. But it usually doesn't work that way. In other words, it's not going to be a feasible business model to say that I run a finance company, and for my non-Jewish clients, I charge interest, and for my Jewish clients, I don't charge interest at all because I don't want to do a heter iska. I guess maybe in principle, you might be able to do it to one or two people under the table or something, however you wanted to structure it. But if any of your non-Jewish clients got wind of it, you could have a class action suit against you. Or certainly anti-Semitism would explode against your company because yeah. But anyway.
So how does this compare to a shopkeeper who relies on his inventory to turn over and make profit, and then he lends and he gives people shroira on credit?
Well, he's not charging them interest. I mean, you're allowed to sell on credit and have people pay you back.
Yeah, so he's losing out on that. They shouldn't give him food on credit.
You're allowed to give food out on credit and have them pay for it later. That's sometimes why sometimes people buy at the local grocer, at the local makolet, because he extends to them on credit. And I don't know if people still do it in Israel today, but they do. Yeah. Yeah. And they just write it down with a pencil on an index card, you know. Yeah.
It used to be in Toronto too. People deliver food on a weekly basis. And then on Sunday you go and collect it.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah.
But the cash would be the inventory of the money lender. Okay.
Okay. Next, She'ela. Mishalava mishnei anoshim b'milva al peh. Ha'im yachol lahachzir bizman hapiraon le'echad mehem et chavo, o eino rashai ela im ken kishnimtzaim shnehem yachdav. Okay, a person takes a loan from two people. I guess we have let's say these two guys are partners in extending a loan to someone. I think Ron's case was you were a co-signer, but let's say two people collectively decide that they're going to lend somebody money. And it's a verbal loan, so there's no paper. And we said originally, a long time ago, that whenever you do loans, it's a mitzvah to do it on paper, even if you trust the guy. But let's say in this case, they were in a rush, they didn't have time. Two guys each one pulls out $100 bill because the guy needs $200. And then it comes time to pay back the loan. can I give the $200 just to one of the two guys, or do they both have to be present when I pay back the loan? That's the shaila. So the answer is Mishalova Mishnayim or Mishnayim Kishneim Shutvim, like, or, let's say when they're partners in this endeavor, B'milva Alpeh, Eno Rishai Lifro Le'echad Mehem Klum, Ela Ad Sheyavohu Shneim Yachad, O Sheyitnu Harsha Zelazeh. So you can't pay back the loan to just one of them unless you get an explicit writ that says you hereby, or with Adam, that you hereby have permission to pay back the loan to one of us. That's and this is the difference between a verbal loan and a non-verbal loan. If whichever one is holding the promissory note, as soon as you pay back the loan, you get the promissory note. So if one of them is holding the promissory note, as long as he relinquishes the promissory note, you can pay that one person the $200. Vim nichtav al shem echad mehem zeh hashtar nichtav al shemo yachol legabos is kol hacho v'hasheni eno yachol legabos klum ad sheyikabel harsha, and that's especially true. In other words, if the promissory note has both their names, but one of them is in possession of the note, then you give him all the money. If the note only has one of their names, so then you can only give him the money and not the other guy, unless, again, there's some kind of what's called a harsha'a, which means permission. Usually it's in writing that you can pay either one. Okay? Next sheila. מי שהבטיח להלווס לפלוני סיכום של כסף, ועכשיו הוא רוצה לחזור בו מהבטחתו. So a person promised to lend money to somebody, and then he wants to withdraw his pledge. Okay? האם נחשב כקבלה לדבר מצווה איני יכול לחזור בו, אלא אם כן יעשה התורה בפני שלושה. The question is, when you make a pledge to tzedakah, you cannot withdraw your pledge unless you get a formal hataras nadarim in front of three people, because your pledge is your bond. In other words, once you commit to tzedakah, you have to fulfill that. It's an actual debt.
If your financial situation has changed,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, you lost your business, you can't make that commitment.
Look, if the charity says we're moichel, that's fine. What if
you don't have to do the rest of the time?
You probably still have to do a hataras nadarim? Probably still have to do it. Yeah. Because you made a pledge. We'll go into the halachic issues. So what if I promise to lend someone money? That's also a mitzvah, but it's not tzedakah. So does it have the same stringency if I can't lend him the money now, or I decide not to lend him the money? Do I have to get a hataras nadarim? So the answer is as follows: Im hivtiach li Yisrael halvosu sikum shel kesef, yesh lo lizaher milachzor bo. He says, if you did pledge to a person, you gave him your word that you would lend him a certain amount of money, you have to be careful not to go back on your word. Because whenever you pledge to do a mitzvah, it's not just tzedakah, but anytime you pledge to do a mitzvah, it becomes like a neder, and you're not allowed to withdraw that pledge. The kol shekain im hifrish o nodar lahafrish sikum shel kesef legamach she'asr lachzabo. And certainly that's true if you had pledged to lend money to a gamach. Let's say a gamach comes to you for a loan. A gamach is any kind of charitable organization, and they want to borrow money from you. Well, you also, if once you gave them your word that you would, you're not allowed to withdraw that. Let me just see if I have the Ahavas Chesed on my Barilan. Let's just take a quick look. He quotes from the Ahavas Chesed. That's the Chafetz Chaim.
There'll be all these different names. That's the name of the safer,
That's the name of the Sefer. Yeah. I'll tell you in a second. Bless you.
So if you said to charity, I'll lend you, or to, $100,000, getting that, or. So that's, you should, but you're not obligated?
If you said Bli Neder, I'm not sure. Depends what the reliance was. You know what I'm saying? In other words, if there was a reliance, where am I? Okay, here we are. Kuf Tzadi Ches. If they were reliant on you, then you probably
Said as something you change, can change a business as poorly and can't do anymore, so we don't need to.
you still might have to. Hold on, Perak Aleph. Osiyud Aleph, he quoted. Let's see. Yeah. So the Chafetz Chaim writes, and let me just, well, you have it here. Let's our people in TV land, I don't think have this. Okay, 1 second. Here we go. Im hivtiach li Yisrael lahalvoso sachma. If you promised a Jew or you gave him your word that you would lend him a certain amount of money, yizoher milachzerbo. You have to be careful not to go back on your word. Dehu kol kabbalah lidvar mitzvah. It's like any kind of acceptance to do or pledge to do a mitzvah. Dekaimelan biyoradeisim and reshid gimel sif beis da asr lachzerbo. That you're not allowed to withdraw that pledge. Va'ayin b'nesiv hachesed de la'asher ulizman meruba de'ein alzeh mitzvahs aseh ein shaykh bazeh sham neder. He quotes a sefer called Nesiv HaChesed, that if you had pledged to give a long-term loan to a person who already has means, then you don't really have the same level of mitzvah there. And I'm not sure, I guess maybe it's because the guy already has his own reserves. And so he was looking for a long-term loan. And the truth is, you know that he can find the money elsewhere. So there, the pledge is not as binding. But even in that case, if you know that he is completely reliant on you in order to be able to, let's say, consummate a deal, and he was counting on you to come up with those funds, nachom li zahir bazeh, you should still fulfill even that kind of pledge so that you don't become what's called a mechusar amana, someone who goes back on his word. We learned about that before. And if you set aside money, or if you made a pledge to lend money to for a mitzvah, for let's say a gemach, then you're certainly not allowed to retract. So he's really our sefer we're learning is really just quoting from straight out of the Chafetz Chaim. Okay, let's see if there's anything in the notes that is worth looking at.
This is significant that he uses the word hivtia, right?
Well, hivtiach just means you gave him your word. You don't have to use the word promise. Said, I'll give you the money. That's also hivtiach. So it's interesting. He quotes the Ran in Nedarim, who says that any acceptance to do a mitzvah is just as binding as an acceptance to give tzedakah. Doesn't matter whether you're pledged to give tzedakah or whether you're pledged to do another mitzvah. Once you've committed to do it, you're obligated to do it. So let's say there's a mitzvah that doesn't cost me money. Let's say I pledge to you, I'm going to give you a ride to shul because your car's in the shop. And so I give you my pledge, I'm going to pick you up in the morning. And I totally forgot. or my alarm clock didn't go off and I slept through it. So that too, or I have to apologize later, but or let's say I don't sleep through it, but I realized later after I gave you my word that I was going to take you to shul that I have to pick up someone from the airport in my family, so I can't pick you up. So that's like a pledge to do a mitzvah. So I have to. Do you have to get a hataras nadarm from that? You have to ask the guy mechila. And as long as he's moichel, I guess you're off the hook. But if let's say it's a mitzvah that doesn't involve another person who you can ask mechila from, let's say a person committed that he's going to recite a certain number of kapitelach of Tehillim every day, and he realizes it's too much for him. So that also requires a hataras nadar, which is interesting.
Does this go? If a customer says, I'll pay you in 30 days, you know, if they in 35 days, it's Sunday, so I'm gonna pay you on time. How far do you take this?
Well, he certainly, as long as he gets your mechila, you don't need a hataras nadar.
So the person you made a pledge to that'll lend you the money, and now I can't. If he's more clear that you don't have to fight, so you have to do it in 30 days.
The question is, if he's moichel you, are you off the hook and you don't need a hataras nadar?
So it never happens to you, but if you sleep in the morning and you miss the
It does happens all of us, yeah.
So what happens? You need to muffle you or just if you
Get rid of the rabbi.
if you know what you have to do.
Yeah, there is no margin of error in my business. Yeah, zero margin of error. Yeah. Let me see if he.
I think it's just a fine line to understand the differences, how far does this go?
Right.
And if the person's not really likely, yeah, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. You really know he's really upset. Like he's like, how far?
If you know someone was reliant upon you, and then you go back on your word and you don't lend him the money. So number one, you're certainly a mechusar amana. You've acted in bad faith. And we learned a number of years ago when we first started learning Choshen Mishpat, when we learned the Sefer Imre Yaakov, that person is a Russia, person who doesn't keep to their word. Yeah. So this whole thing about a hataras nadarim, I don't know that it's I think you should have it in mind, let's say Erev Rosh Hashanah, when you get your hataras nadarim. Like, did I go back on my word to anybody? Did I promise that I was going to do something or give my word that I was going to do something and then never followed through? I've probably done that before. Like people come over to me on Shabbos and say, I need some information. And I usually, like I say, I'll be happy to give it to you. But by now I know myself. I never remember what people ask me to help them with on Shabbos. So I tell people, if you can please email me after Shabbos, I'll be happy to get you the information because I usually forget. But I used to always say, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And, by the time I'm home from shul, I totally forget to do it. So there's a lot of cases like that. So those are things which you should, that you're getting hataras nadarim for, because a lot of times people do rely on you. If you say you're going to do something and then you forget about it. So at least it's worth keeping in mind that try to catch yourself before you make a commitment and say, yes, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to make a note to myself in order to make sure that I do it. It's not just when it comes to tzedakah. It could be things that have no financial repercussion at all. Okay.
What if you say, I'll try? Is that a commitment or is it?
Well, what if you don't even try? Like a lot of times we know we're not going to do something. So you say, I'll try. Because you just want to get rid of the guy, right? That's not,
Or I'll think about
I'll think about it. And
Thought about it then, so you're on the phone.
it.
You're done.
I mean, the truth is you should try to be truthful. A lot of times it's inconvenient or uncomfortable to tell someone to their face, I don't think this is for me. I know this would be very helpful to you, but someone's trying to sell you a product and just want to get rid of them. So you say, I'll think about it. I mean, I think by that today, when you tell someone, I'll think about it, they know what the answer is. No.
I'll have to speak to my wife.
Yeah, right. That's an automatic no.
So,
Right. Okay. Sheila. Mi shalava bishtar v'higia zman hapiraon ucheshabali froa eschovo. So a person who borrowed money with a promissory note, the note has matured. It's time to pay back the loan. And when he comes to pay back the loan, Hamalva Omer She'enu Motze Achshav Ashtar. The lender says, I can't find the promissory note. So Ha'im Halova Yocholomer Lamalve Rak Bisman Shata Tachzir Ashtar Niyefer Lachas Chovecha. So can the borrower now say, well, produce the note and I'll give you the money. If you can't produce the note, I'm not paying you back. Is that an option? Oh, yifralo chashim samal v'sashtar yikra sashtar. Or is the halacha that no, you have to pay back the loan, and when the lender finds the note, he'll tear it up. So the question is, obviously from a legal standpoint, this is pretty clear cut. If a person can't find the promissory note, the Gemara does provide a remedy. There's something called a shovar, which is a receipt. The borrower has the right to demand either the promissory note in return, and if the promissory note is not available, the lender can say, I will write you a receipt that says that I received a payment back from you for the loan that was made on such and such a date, and you no longer owe me any money. Okay. The problem with that is that a borrower could still argue, you mean to tell me that now the burden of having to have a piece of paper to protect myself is upon me now, where previously it was upon you. Now, as previously, in order to get your money to ensure that you'd get paid back, you had to hold on to the note. For whatever reason, you were negligent, you can't find the note, or maybe you're pretending you can't find the note, and now you want to place the burden on me. I got to hold on to this receipt for years now to make sure you don't come after me. I don't want to do that. Well, sometimes there's no choice if the lender says, I can't find it. So that's really the basis of this question. Does the borrower therefore have a right to say, no ticky, no surety, right? Like the old saying goes. Well, if you can't produce the promissory note, I'm not paying you back because I don't want to have to be stuck like this. So what would be the halacha in that kind of situation? And especially probably that's a big issue when it comes to large loans, right? Large business loans and things like that. So the tshuva is, Mishalava bishtar, kol zman, she'eno machzer lo hamalve es ashtar, ein halov etzarach lifro eschovo ad shamalve yachzer shtara. So if a person borrowed money with a promissory note, meaning that the lender required a note in order to lend him money, which is the right thing to do. So if the lender cannot produce the note, then the borrower has no obligation to pay him back until he produces the note. Va'afilu im hamalva yirtze lichtov lo shovar eino chayev lifro'alo. And that's true even if the lender is willing to write a receipt. The lovic can say, I don't want to have to be burdened with having to hold on to that paper. However, there's a caveat to this, because if that's the case, then is that justice? The lender is never going to get his money back. He says it's only when the lender acknowledges that the promissory note is still around. So he knows that the promissory note is still around. He just says, listen, it's inconvenient for me because it's in another city, because I happen to meet you up. I lent a guy money in New York. I happen to be in New York. I want to come and pick up the loan. So the borrower says, sure, no problem. I'm happy to give you the money. I'll pay you cash. we'll do it when you're at the chasana in New York. The problem is that the lender says, oh, I schlepped all the way here to New York to come to this simcha. I forgot to bring the paperwork. So the borrower has every right to say, I'm sorry, I'd love to pay you back, but we'll have to do this at another time when you can return the paperwork. Okay, so there the lender really is in the wrong. The lender, if he wanted to get paid back at live in New York on the spot, he should have brought the paperwork with him. So that therefore the borrower does have a legal right to say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to pay you now because you don't have the promissory note. Aval im hamal v'toyin she'avad hashtar, sorach lifroa hacho v'hamal v'yichtav lo shover. But if the lender says, I've lost the shtar, I've looked all over for it and I cannot find it, then the borrower does have to pay back the money because there's no remedy for this. And so, and the lender will write a receipt, and the borrower has no choice but to accept it. He may want to protect himself further. I don't know how he could do that. Maybe get witnesses or something like that. What's a legal precedent for this?
So you can get an acknowledgement of payment, maybe with witnesses or without witnesses.
Have it registered with
Registered or have this they call a satisfaction piece. If there's a judgment, you pay the judgment, have that filed with the court. That the guy acknowledges payment.
And what about a private loan? Can there be such a thing as registering it with the court?
No, not really, but you would get a full and final release as another document you would get to say that he releases me from the debt, having just received payment. So it's documentation.
But there's no such thing as a guy arguing, I don't want to have to be burdened with having to hold on to the documentation. Now,
I mean, the burden is, let the guy draft the document, like the lender will draft and have a lawyer draft the documentation and the guy will sign
yeah,
it.
the lawyer's fees are on the
Yeah.
are on the lender because he can't find the note. Okay. Now, v'im choshe shalova sheyachol lavo lidei hefsed me ovdan hashtar. But let's say the borrower is worried, I may lose this receipt, and then you're going to find you'll miraculously discover that you really had the note all the time, and I'm going to be in trouble. Or let's say somebody else will find it. Maybe you genuinely did lose it, but someone else will find it and be able to use it to collect. Then you also have a right to have the lender write you, put it in writing even, that he accepts any liability for the loss of the promissory note. Which means, what if you're concerned that he's going to, he'll write you a receipt, but then someone else will come up with the note of collection and make life miserable for you, and he'll take you to court and note. So you can have the lender who was supposed to produce the note come up with some kind of writ of liability that I hereby will be completely responsible if, as a result of my losing the note, something happens to you that causes you a loss of money. I'll make you whole, right? Which I guess is there a clause like that, a remedy like that?
In a final release, there's generally an indemnity clause that says if it causes someone third party comes in, everybody will indemnify me and all that. There are clauses like that.
Okay. So, I mean, but this is like a real life, a very legitimate situation where I'm annoyed the guy doesn't have the promissory. I'm like, where is it, man? And so you have to indemnify me. If as a result of someone else finding that note, someone's going to come after me, you have to make me whole. Okay, we'll hold it here for today.